You're listening to the Media People Podcast, the show where we learn about the people who make up the media industry. I'm your host, Victor Genova. For more episodes, go to soundcloud.com/mediapeoplepodcast or subscribe on iTunes by searching Media People Podcast. Views expressed by participants are personal. It's part 2 of our chat with Marilyn Sherman, Media Director at 26Two International. In this episode, we chat about her time at Echo Advertising in 26Two, but we also get further insight into the unique workings of the agency world as Marilyn shares a story with us about how an out-of-home rep pitched the wrong solution for the wrong advertiser and how it inadvertently turned out to be the right solution that helped Marilyn and her team win over a new client. This, of course, leads us into a discussion about the erosion of face time between agencies and media sales reps and why it's more important than ever to reverse this trend. If you haven't already, you can catch up on part 1 of our chat on SoundCloud or iTunes.
Our relationship, Len and I are still working together 31 years later, but my time at Echo was over 20 years.
20 years. You don't see that in this business. A lot of people move around, but no, you were like a bedrock there. So tell us about your time at Echo.
It was a lot of fun. So the same way my career started at Safir on retail, and if you think about retail, it's transactions. That's what retail is. Yep. It's a little less about building brands and it's a lot more about transactions. Making the turnstile turn, putting a bum in seat, making cash register ring, all that part of transactions. Len's background was the entertainment business, record business. He grew up on CBS Records, was his early career. He worked at a couple different record companies. Yes, record companies. And basically his vision was to create the number one ad agency for the entertainment business in Canada and North America, really. And when I started at Echo, there were 12 people, and in our heyday, we were over 200 people. So we really did grow the agency. I grew it from a 3-person media department to over 40 people at one point.
Was it hard, though, to keep that small agency culture when you hit the 200 mark?
It was certainly a little bit more difficult. We kept a very entrepreneurial atmosphere, much like I learned at Safir, and Len was very similar. We let people kind of have enough rope that they didn't hang themselves. We didn't let anybody drown, but we certainly let the water get pretty high up the chin. But nobody drowned. We didn't let anybody really, fail, but we certainly gave people lots of room to excel. And I'm very proud to say there's a lot of people who cut their chops at Echo, got their career started at Echo, and have moved on to be very successful in this business. And it's kind of funny, you just, have reps come in or other buyers that we meet and you start to talk and, don't you remember me? I was at Echo. Yeah, I remember you. Sometimes I don't, but I have to say I do.
Gotcha. Well, it's funny you mentioned that because on your LinkedIn profile, one thing that you do have there is you mentioned that you really like mentoring and hiring the best talent. Tell us about that facet of your job.
I think that was that was a cultural thing we did at Echo. So, remember the good old days at Echo, again, I'm going back to the 90s. We would have a philosophy that every year we would rate the top school or programs, and Humber College had, I don't really have it anymore, but literally a media, advertising, and sales program. We called it Barb and Donna's Kids.
Yep,
but
I've heard that before.
I'm sure everybody's heard of I'm a Barb and Donna's Kid. So Humber College, originally at Finch, and then it moved to the Lakeshore campus. And really, they did an excellent job. They had both a fast track program for university graduate kids, a 2-year program, and they had, I think, a 3 or 4-year program where you literally came out as a media buyer, planner, or a sales rep. And our relationship with the course, I guest lectured there and supported the program as many ways as possible, but you had an internship at the end. If you were a student in the program, you had to do a 6-week internship to graduate. So Echo was renowned that we always took 1 or 2 or even 3 students sometimes if I had a place on a desk. And at the end of those, we always asked for the best and the brightest, and if they reached our standards, we would hire them. Even if I wasn't looking for staff, and we didn't pay a lot, but I always found a little bit of money and said, okay, I'm going to hire the rising stars coming out of school because I know that my kids after 2, 3, 4 years are going to want to move to greener pastures, often moved into sales or, rep positions or moved on to other agencies. And that was one of our philosophies is hire them, bring them in, train them. And I am quite proud that we've hired, groomed, and brought in a lot of really good talent into the industry. And they cut their chops at Echo Advertising.
Would you say that attitude you have towards mentoring people rubbed off on you from your early gigs? Because it sounds like you were surrounded by a number of people you could look up to and call on as mentors in your first gig.
I agree. I think at Saffir, Anne Raymond, Julius Freilich, who I believe is still in the industry. There was Carl Lieberman. There were some great, media directors, co-media directors who I got to work with who gave me the chance and, let me cut my teeth and try things and do things and write media plans and go to client meetings probably way before the time that I should have been allowed to do it. Based on how things go in the industry now, usually you have to, wait a year or two before you even get to buy a market on your own or go to a meeting with a client. So very much, I think it was that entrepreneurial spirit by media directors that I got to work with. And I decided that was going to be my style as well, is give them opportunities.
Tell us a little bit more about the environment at Echo, working on entertainment clients. I used to be kind of like an unofficial movie rep back in the day where I had a lot of studios just in my territory. I know some people frown on that. They think that it's a little too fast-paced. Sometimes it's unpredictable because you've got a changing schedule every year, more movies, fewer movies, different release dates. I thought it was fantastic. I relished at the chance to work on movie clients. So tell us a bit about what it was like at Echo then, managing them.
So first of all, I'm probably one of the few people that's been 17 years. I think there's a couple others, but you can count on one hand the number of media buyers who got on movie business and stayed with it. So Echo handled Alliance Atlantis for 17 years. First movie was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, God,
See,
the
everything
first
comes
one?
around.
Yep.
Yes. So that would have been in the 80s, I think, 90s.
And we just released the reboot last
Yeah,
year.
I know.
The sequel
It's
comes
kind of
out
weird.
next summer.
Everything goes around. So we worked on movie business for 17 years, and you are so right. I'd put certain buyers on movie business and watch them just crumble. Doesn't mean they weren't great buyers. They just weren't cut out for it. So what made me love movie business? I loved the fast pace. Didn't bother me that movies and plans were changing all the time. But if it bothered you that you had to write and rewrite a plan 40 times, or that you would come in Monday morning and plan to do one project and then get the phone ring at 10 o'clock and you'd review the numbers of the weekend, and all of a sudden you were buying holdover weight and heavy up weight, or you were canceling weight because the movie took a dive and you had to cancel all the weight that you had for week 2. If you couldn't handle that pace, it didn't work for you. I know a lot of movie clients who, kind of just bought a whole bunch of media and then allocated it by film. We wrote different plans for every film. Every film had a different target, different genre. In the heyday at Alliance, we worked on over 40 movies a year. Yeah,
that's
like
fantastic.
Every week we had movies. Like at one point we were releasing 1 or 2 movies a week sometimes.
Now sometimes studios are anywhere between 10 and 25. I won't name the studio, but I had one where they did really well one year. And then the following year, it was very poor, so that to make up for it. Because you know how it is with movie clients. You plan for the year in advance.
Right.
And that sets the tone for the next year. So even though you're like, you put out 20 movies, but they sank.
Yeah.
And I remember having to go back to my boss and being like, they went from 22 movies to 14 movies. You can't expect the same amount of money.
Right.
And you know what else has disappeared from movie clients? Now that I'm working on it in digital, the concept of a week 2 buy. Is that what they called it? Yeah, after the release week. The holdover, okay.
Yeah, the week 2 or the holdover buy.
I don't see that at all anymore. It seems like the Sunday after the movie's been released, or even the Saturday, that's it. You stop with the media.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not working on any major movie client. We work on a couple of very small Canadian producer ones. But you're right, the films don't get held over. I have to interview whoever's working on the big movie studios right now, but I believe what's happening is just more product, so that film moves out. And at the end of the day, they're all making their money on the back end, whether it's the digital release of the film or the play on TV. So I think they're supporting more the digital release.
That's one thing I wanted to ask you, home entertainment, because that was something that started to take off, I assume, as you were at Echo.
Yeah, the end of my career at Echo, so in the mid 2000s. I remember one of the last pictures I worked on was Wedding Crashers, and it did huge at the video store. But there's no more video store. Even Walmart doesn't sell videos anymore.
No, that's tanking completely. Yeah. But what was the opportunity like to kind of grow that segment? Because I imagine it was in its infancy.
it was a huge opportunity, and we really watched the dollars move from the theatrical release to where they could really make money is in selling the DVDs. And I can remember Christmas time, we used to do huge pushes on buying DVDs, first VHSs, but then DVDs for Christmas gifts. But yeah, that's a while ago. That's history.
Speaking of history with Echo, in 2005 it was sold. You mentioned that. So how did that change the nature of the business?
Yeah, that was an interesting time. So, Echo wasn't looking to be sold. I mean, Len wasn't really looking to make any changes, but sometimes an offer is too good to turn down, and there was a lot of money thrown our way. We all made a little bit of money, not enough to retire, and I was too young to retire, but there was a nice little bit of money paid out for Echo. New owners came in. They were a company out of the UK, really knew nothing about the Canadian marketplace or the US marketplace, but felt that an ad agency would be nice to complement. They were in the promotions business, sponsorship business. I don't even remember all the details, but they brought their own people in. Len was asked to leave, which was a very hard day in my life. And they brought their new people in, and basically within a year ran Echo to the ground. It's a complicated time and probably one I don't need to spend a lot of time on, but needless to say, I got out before the very end and had an opportunity to leave, so I took it.
And where did that opportunity come from?
So a bunch of creative people and account servicing people left to a small agency called The Collective. They were actually called something else before that, but ended up being renamed The Collective. And basically they were a very entrepreneurial, retail type ad agency, handled a bit of shopping malls. So I certainly knew a lot about shopping malls from my Safford days. They handled clients in the real estate business, mostly malls, but some real estate as well, and had no concept of a media department. It was basically account servicing people. And I think there were about 12 people there at the time. So they had creative people and account servicing people. And basically any media, basically a print ad, because that's all they ever did, that had to be booked. The account servicing people booked a print ad. They picked up the phone and called and booked a print ad. And that was already 2005. So should have been a bit more elaborate. Certainly there was a lot more to media then. So basically I had an opportunity to start a media department in a small upstart agency. And it was a great opportunity to start all over. I mean, because you think about at Echo, I had certainly built a media department, well established. There were probably about 20 people in the media department when I left Echo. We had obviously gone from much larger to much smaller. And it was time to start over. So it was, again, a good opportunity to be able to hire people, bring in young talent again, and begin working, with a very entrepreneurial shop, as I said. I just say one of my, I know one of the questions later you're going to ask, but it was actually at the Collective, one of most interesting accounts that I got to work on, and it was the Ride to Conquer Cancer. Okay. There's a whole bunch of them, but there was the Underwear Fair, the Ride to Conquer Cancer, and the Weekend Walk, which were fundraising events, great causes, obviously. And this was a client that hadn't done anything on digital. Basically, everything was radio, television. Basically, all the ad dollars were put to broadcast. Very transactional, because everything was about signing people up for the event. And I was able to work with some key online suppliers and create a before cost per acquisition was really the in thing. This was 2006, 2007. But we created a cost per acquisition model where we only paid the digital companies, and Yahoo was one of the first, so I'm very excited to work with Yahoo at that stage, who agreed we'd only pay based on people signing up or agreeing to give their email and then signing up for the events. So it wasn't about raising money, it was just about agreeing to ride in the ride or walk the walk. So it was a real cost per acquisitional way before CPA was an in thing to do. Not sure they're doing it anymore, but it was done in the 2000s while I was at the Collective, and it was a great success.
Looking back on your career, how has the dynamic changed between, say, rep and agency or media supplier and agency? Because I remember when I got my first break at CBC and I was a coordinator there, a lot of the senior television reps who started in the 70s and 80s would be like, we didn't email or fax anything off. We walked over with the buy sheet, they signed it, and we walked back with it.
The good old days. I think that's a part of our, I mean, obviously we have this wonderful technology, email's wonderful, voicemail, the fact that you can email a contract and have it back and sign it online. Even some of them have automatic signature signing online. But I think it's really sad that we've gone away from the face-to-face. I'm really pro face-to-face. If any rep who's listening knows that if you call me and you want to come in for a presentation, we make the time. If I really don't want to see you, I might tell you to come in at 4:00 on Friday, but aside from that, we make the time. So I think it's really, really important, and I'm very disappointed when I hear, and sales reps tell me all the time, buyers don't even return my calls. They don't even answer the emails, and certainly they don't allow for face-to-face meetings. So I'm going to tell you the true story, and I tell this at every lecture, every year when I go out to Humber College or any of the other colleges that I get to guest lecture. I talk about relationships and how relationships get built and why you should see every single rep. So here's how the story goes. And I don't know exactly what year, but it was during my Echo days. A rep called, and I was working on live entertainment. That was the client brought Phantom of the Opera and Joseph, and there was a play called Sunset Boulevard. And Sunset Boulevard was playing up in North York at that Toronto Centre for Performing Arts up at Yonge and Sheppard.
Yep.
So this rep calls me, and he's, I literally think he was just off the boat. Literally, South African accent. Hi, just arrived. Don't ask me how he got his name, how he got my name, but anyhow. Hi, I'm Les Abro, because I'm going to tell you who it is, and I have this great idea for Sunset Boulevard, but I have to come and show you. And he said something about a parking lot boom arm, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. So I tell him, and I could tell, like, oh, what's this guy? He's just wasting my time. But I agree to see him, 4:00 on a Friday. And he walks in the summer, he walks in at 4:00 on a Friday, literally carrying this fiberglass sleeve. You know what the boom arms look like? They go up and down. So he's carrying this sleeve, and he's done artwork, and it says, "This way to Sunset Boulevard." Horrible creative idea, because it's not that way, except he's got that one parking lot near Yonge and Sheppard. Yeah. So he comes in and he tells me, I've got this parking lot, it's near Yonge and Sheppard, I can put your ad on it. And I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm going to sell a show on one little sleeve this way to Sunset Boulevard. That's not going to sell me a ticket. And in the meantime, we were pitching a client in the mutual fund business. And I just said, stay here in this little boardroom. And I went running around to Len at the time, who was writing the pitch. And I said, Len, I got an idea. This guy says he can get all the parking lots. I said, what if we could get, for this mutual fund client, reach all the financial districts so that all the financial planners, accountants, bank people, etc., can be hit with our ad every time they go in and out of work and drive into the parking lots. Len says, where's this guy? And we go running and we sit with them and we say, okay, go get me all the parking lots in the financial core. And we tell him which buildings we want or whatever. And the truth was he didn't have them yet. I didn't know that till after. He said, yeah, no problem. I'm going to get them for you. He didn't have them. He had no clue how it should be priced. Basically, we sent him away. And my feeble brain, I'm not very creative, but I was going to say this. It was dynamic. Dynamic mutual funds always going up with an arrow on the parking lot arm. But of course, you can't say that because mutual funds sometimes don't go up. But anyhow, we then wrote our pitch to the client and we said, we can get all these parking lots. Meantime, Les Abro and his company Abcon had to go figure out how to get these parking lots. He had to go work with the landlords and whatever, but he figured it out. He didn't get all of them, but he got enough. And we used it as part of our pitch. We won the business. We ended up doing a deal. The first year, I think I spent $60,000 with him because he had no clue how to cost it. He couldn't even tell me how many cars, how many eyeballs. I said, okay, let's just count the number of parking spots and we'll estimate every spot turns over 1.5 times. We made a whole formula and we figured out how to buy it and he figured out how to sell it. The moral of my story is we wouldn't have won the account if I hadn't seen this rep come up with a big idea. It ended up helping make his company a lot of money. We went from spending $60,000 to over $1 million in that with that company over a very short period of time. And all because I agreed to see him on a Friday at 4:00. So it helped me win a piece of business, helped me come up with a great medium. And the client used that medium for 10 years. So that's a lot of money.
And both of you went into this meeting with different expectations.
Totally.
And you came out with it with a huge opportunity.
Win, win, win is really what I can say. And it's happened before. We've had other, reps come in with an idea or pitching one thing, and basically we work out in a different direction.
See, people are calling you right now.
all the
They're
time.
listening
This
to
phone
this.
rings constantly, even at 10 to 6.
Someone's trying to sell you a subway station or another. They found another parking lot.
They found
That's
another
what it was.
parking lot, totally. Anyhow, please, to all sales reps, just keep bugging it. Hopefully the good buyers will see you. And buyers, make sure you answer your phone.
Yep, they need to hear that.
And do face-to-face meetings. It's important.
Yeah, there's less and less of that. So after that, is this when you found your way to 26Two International?
So Collective was kind of a short stint, and I was there, I guess, about 4 or 5 years. At the time, Len Gill had kind of did a few other things. Remember, Len and I had worked together for over 20 years at Echo. Mm-hmm. We still worked together. In fact, while I was at the Collective, Len was working on a couple projects, and I was helping him buy media even while I was at the Collective. And then Len decided, okay, 26Two is really growing. He'd picked up some accounts in New York, including Spider-Man on Broadway, and
Turn Off the Dark.
Turn Off the Dark.
That was very controversial.
Yeah, and there was Rock of Ages, and suddenly Len was busier than ever. And he said, okay, enough of you at the Collective. You're going to come back and join me. I need you full time. So for a while, I kind of did a bit of both, and I was kind of helping the Collective on a couple of projects, and then Len realized, okay, I need you full time, and my passion has always been entertainment. And as much as I enjoyed my time at the Collective and working on the not-for-profit accounts, I realized, entertainment and working with Len was what I really wanted. So in 2010, I was 26Two, and I'm not saying we're the next entertainment agency, but I now get to work on a combination of entertainment and not-for-profit and a couple of other fun accounts. So it's all good.
Talk to me about working on a theater client, because in comparison to movie clients or music clients or anything like that, it seems like they're a little bit more resilient to what's happening in the media landscape. Like we talk about home entertainment taking a dive because of piracy. Movies are becoming few and far between or because they're getting bigger budgets. What about theater, though?
I think live theater is also changing. I think if you look at the amount of shows that are out there, there's a lot of product. There's a lot of the old stuff. There's new stuff. I think today's generation didn't grow up on the same type of theater. The favorites like Phantom of the Opera and things like that. I mean, although it's coming back, I think there's just more of it. Look at Toronto. I mean, there's so much theater here.
It seemed to be back in the day much more regal and limited, and now they're taking you've got a lot of the big pop bands pumping out musicals and things like that, turning TV shows and whatnot into it.
The fun part, and I would say also the nerve-wracking part of theater, is you just never know what's going to be a hit. You know what? I just worked on Cats. I guess it was 2 summers ago now. How many years Cats has kept playing here? Shock of shocks. I mean, we did phenomenally well. We sold, thousands and thousands of tickets. And then you have other great shows that come into town and you can't give away a ticket. So you just never know. You never know what's going to do well. That's the fun part, but that's also the angst. It's like you put a show on sale and you hold your breath because you don't know.
And you guys don't just work on Canadian markets; you work on U.S. markets. And I've been pretty close with a lot of your employees before, and just listening to them talk about trying to buy radio in San Jose, and they can just name off the markets. I mean, how do you? Being based in Toronto, I guess, how do you get to learn the local U.S. marketplace for handling those buys? You know what? Now that we have internet, it's even easier. First of all, you can listen to a radio station. It's very simple to do. It's easy. Go on the website, learn the station. We do a lot of market trips. We send buyers out to different markets, too. One of my buyers is heading down to Washington next month, and he's been working on some Washington buys. We have the show Sherlock Holmes going to Washington, as well as playing Toronto. But David Arquette.
David Arquette. In Sherlock Holmes.
From Screen.
Toronto, end of October. And then there's an LA date we're working on, Washington, Chicago, and Toronto. So the real answer is being a little agency up in Toronto buying U.S. media is great, because when you call a local rep, they're like, oh, you're in Toronto. And it sounds funny, but quite often we're able to negotiate and get what I consider to be better deals because we're up in Toronto, and they think that's kind of neat. It's kind of sexy. We're not going to go call them and blab to all the other buyers in the marketplace because we're just buying it for our little theater clients that's coming through town. So it seems to work well for us buying out of here. But we make market trips and we go to the local markets and meet with reps all the time. This has been a wonderful chat. I wanted to close it off with one question I ask everyone. If you weren't in media, what would you be doing and why? That was the toughest question. I know you gave me the heads up. I don't don't know what else I'd be doing. You know what? I love the people of this business, so I'd want to do something related to the people industry, the people part of this industry.
Become a headhunter?
I guess. Maybe I would teach. Maybe I'd get in front of the students and get to have an experience with them. But I don't know. I'm lucky that I never had to think about it. Luckily, I've never been in that position.
So let me ask you this then. When you are teaching at Humber or you're doing guest lectures, clearly there's a Q&A at the end. Someone has to ask you where you went to college.
They do. That's the funniest. Or they ask me, how did I get into this business? And I got to tell you, my kids who are college, university age now are like, "Ma, you can't go and teach and guest lecture. You're not even a college or university graduate." Yeah, my story is quite unique. I tell them, don't do that path. That's just about tripping into it. But you know what? I'd love to go back to school. So probably my real answer to your question is I'd like to go back to school if I weren't working, if I weren't doing this. I think I'd like to be a student. I'd love to go to university. I don't know how many years I could do that for. So I'd like to be a student and then be a teacher. I don't know if that's the real answer, but I think if I ever retired from this business, I'd go to school because I feel like I missed out.
You're not missing out on anything. You've got a wonderful story here. Marilyn, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
really
you, Victor. This was fun.
This.
This was a lot of fun. Everybody should try doing this.
No, it should be on my show. Don't get a competing podcast.
No, not a competing. Just Victor. If Victor calls, take his call.
Thanks, Marilyn.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's show. For more episodes, go to soundcloud.com/MediaPeoplePodcast or subscribe on iTunes by searching Media People Podcast. And follow me on Twitter @VicGenova.